I want to say something that almost nobody in leadership says out loud. Leadership is lonely. Not the glamorous kind of lonely that looks good in a memoir. Not the heroic solitude of someone standing apart from the crowd with a vision nobody else can see yet. The real kind, the 2 a.m. kind, the kind where 50 people are looking at you for certainty and you are not certain, the kind where you have made a decision that affects people and livelihoods and you cannot share your doubt with any of them because you are the one they are supposed to trust. The kind where you sit in a meeting performing confidence with while something in you is quietly asking, am I doing this right? Does anyone know what I actually know? Is everyone else feeling what I am feeling? I have felt this in my own work, in my own leadership. And I have seen it unmistakably in the eyes of managers and leaders across every organization I have worked with. The loneliness of leadership is real, it is universal, and it is one of the most ignored variables in organizational performance. Here is what happens when leadership loneliness goes unaddressed. And I want to be clear, this is not just a personal well being issue. This has direct, measurable consequences for organizational performance. When leaders feel genuinely isolated, without anyone to be honest with, without a safe space to be uncertain, three things happen, always in this order. First, they stop asking for help because asking for help feels like weakness and weakness feels like career risk, especially at higher levels of the organization where the expectation of certainty compounds with every promotion. So they carry more than they should. They make decisions with less input than they need. They miss things they would have caught if they had someone to think out loud with. Second, they stop admitting uncertainty because projecting certainty is what the role seems to require. The leader is supposed to know, the leader is supposed to have the answer. And so they perform certainty, even when they are not certain, especially in public. And over time, that performance becomes a prison because you cannot ask for help with a problem you have publicly declared you have under control. Third, they stop being honest about what is not working. Because vulnerability at the top feels genuinely dangerous, every admission of difficulty can be read as weakness. Every acknowledgement of a problem can be read as incompetence. And so the leader becomes less honest over time with their organization, with their team. And then, quietly, invisibly, they disconnect from their teams, from their own instincts, from their sense of purpose in the work. And we call this burnout or disengagement or poor leadership performance. And we respond with performance management or a leadership course or a team restructure. When the root cause almost always is loneliness. And loneliness untreated becomes disconnection. And disconnection in a leader contaminates the whole, the entire team system around them. Three things that make it worse. I want to name three patterns that I see consistently in organizations. Patterns that make leadership loneliness significantly worse. Not because organizations intend this, but because the culture has been built in a way that systematically isolates the people at the top. Pattern 1, performing certainty constantly. Most organizational cultures, consciously or unconsciously, reward confident leaders and penalize uncertain ones. The leader who says, I'm not sure, what do you all think, is sometimes respected for this. Often, they are quietly read as indecisive. And so, leaders learn to perform certainty they do not always feel. And the performance cuts them off from the most valuable resource available, honest input from the people around them. When a leader cannot admit they do not know, they cannot learn and they cannot connect, because all genuine connection requires some vulnerability, and vulnerability requires safety, and safety is impossible when the culture punishes uncertainty. Pattern 2: Isolation disguised as independence. There is a version of leadership that mistakes being alone for being strong, solo decision making for decisiveness, self sufficiency for competence. And many organizations reinforce this. The leader who handles everything themselves is seen as capable. The leader who consistently seeks inputs and builds thinking partnership is sometimes seen as needy or lacking confidence. But solo decision making is not strength, it is just expensive. You get fewer perspectives, you make more mistakes, and you pay the price of carrying the weight alone, which is significant, sustained, and invisible in performance reviews. Pattern 3: No peer community where honesty is safe. Most leaders inside organizations have no genuinely safe peer community. Every conversation is politically loaded. Every admission of difficulty carries career risk. Every vulnerability might be remembered in a promotion discussion, a raise structure, a budget conversation. And so, leaders do not talk honestly with their peers. They perform competence with each other as much as they do with their teams. The result is a group of people, sometimes in the same organization, sometimes in the same leadership team, each of whom feels privately isolated. None of them knows what everyone else feels the same way. Three things that make it manageable. So, what actually helps? I want to give you three things that I have seen make leadership loneliness genuinely manageable. Not theoretical suggestions, but practices I have observed in leaders who sustain real performance over time. First, chosen vulnerability in the right direction. I want to be precise about this because it is often misunderstood. Vulnerability downward to your team in ways that make them feel responsible for your emotional state or uncertain about the direction, that is not helpful. That destabilizes rather than connects. Vulnerability upward and sideways to mentors, coaches, and trusted peers who have no direct stake in your organization's politics, that is profoundly different. When a leader can say to someone outside their immediate sphere, I am not sure I am making the right call on this. I feel out of my depth in this situation. I am carrying something I cannot figure out how to resolve. And that person can receive it, hold it, and respond honestly without any political agenda. Then something releases. The weight does not disappear, but it becomes possible to think more clearly about it. The leaders I have worked with who sustain the highest performance over the longest periods, almost every one of them has at least one relationship like this. One person outside the organization they can be completely honest with. This is not a luxury. For serious leaders at serious organizations, it is infrastructure. Second, a reflective practice. Running is mine. I want to say that directly because it matters to how I understand this. When I am on a road at 5 a.m., alone, no phone, no meetings, no agenda, something becomes possible that is not possible anywhere else. Honest thoughts, not performance, not problem solving with an audience, just the thoughts that arise when there is nothing to do except put one foot in front of the other. Every leader I know who sustains healthy functioning has some version of this. It does not have to be running, it can be walking, meditation, writing, time in nature, prayer, any practice that creates unstructured space with no performance required. The key is that it is genuinely unstructured, not a productivity exercise, not a planning session disguised as rest. A space where the mind can do what it cannot do in any other part of the leader's life. Simply be. And in that space, clarity arrives. Not always, not reliably, but often enough that the practice becomes essential. 3. A thinking partner. This is the most practically specific of the three. A thinking partner is someone outside your organization, outside your immediate professional world, who has no stake in your decisions and no agenda for your organization. They do not need to be a coach, though coaches can serve this function. They need to be someone who will tell you the truth, who will push back when they think you are wrong, who will ask the uncomfortable question your team cannot ask because the relationship is asymmetric. I have been this person for leaders across Northeast India, and the single most consistent observation I have from that work is this: the transformation I see when a leader simply has a safe space to think clearly without performing, without an audience, without political calculation. It is not subtle, it is dramatic. Not because I give them answers they could not have found themselves, but because the space to think clearly is in itself so rare in their professional lives that accessing it, even occasionally, changes everything. I want to share something personal. There was a period in my own professional life, I will not give you the exact timing, where I felt genuinely isolated, not in the personal sense. I had people around me, family, friends, colleagues, but professionally, I was carrying things I could not share with any of them. Client challenges that required confidentiality, decisions about the direction of my own work that had no clear right answer, doubts about whether I was building something real or something that only looked real from the outside. I could not bring these things to clients. They needed me to project competence. I could not bring them to colleagues. They were navigating their own uncertainties. I could not bring them fully to family because the professional context was too specialized and the weight of it felt unfair to transfer to them. And running, which I had been doing for some time, some years, became something more than physical discipline in that period. It became the only space I had where I was accountable to no one. On those roads at 5 a.m. with no audience, no performance, no role to maintain, I could think honestly about what I was building, about what I actually believed, about where I was certain and where I was just performing certain. That period eventually changed. I found a thinking partner, someone outside my immediate professional world, whose only stake was the quality of my thinking, not in what I decided, not in any particular outcome for their own interest. And when I found that, when I had a space where I could be completely honest about what I was experiencing at that time, everything changed. Everything shifted. Not because the problems disappeared, not because the uncertainty resolved, but because I could think more clearly. And in leadership, the quality of your thinking under pressure is almost everything. I share this not because my story is unusual. I share it because I believe it is far more common than most leaders admit. And because I want anyone watching this who recognizes what I am describing to know, the loneliness you feel is not a sign that you are not good enough for the role. It is a sign that you are carrying genuine weight, that you are taking a responsibility seriously, and that you do not have to carry it entirely alone. So, let me ask you this directly. Where in your leadership right now do you feel most alone? Not publicly. You do not need to answer this in the comments, though you are welcome to. But privately, honestly, where is the thing you are carrying that you have no space to set down? Because I think that question and the honesty it requires is where real leadership development begins. Not in the frameworks, not in the competency modules or models. In the willingness to acknowledge the weight and then to find the right support for carrying it. Three things. A person you can be completely honest with, outside the politics of your immediate world, a practice that creates unstructured space where your mind can work without an audience, and if nothing else, the willingness to name what you are actually carrying, even just to yourself. And if you are an HR leader or a CHRO watching this, I want to ask you something different. Do your leaders have a safe space to be uncertain? Not in the box ticking sense, not a wellness program with a helpline number, a genuine, ongoing space where the person you have put in leadership position can acknowledge what they are actually experiencing. If the answer is no, I want to suggest that this is not a wellness problem, it is a performance problem. Isolated leaders make worse decisions. They sustain lower performance over time. They exit organizations mentally long before physically when the weight of carrying everything alone becomes unsustainable. The investment in leadership support structure is not a luxury. For organizations serious about sustained performance, it is very much essential. If you want to talk about what real leadership support looks like inside your organization, the link is in the description. Reach out directly. And if this video resonated, share it with one leader in your network who is carrying something alone right now. They might not have words for what they are experiencing. This might be the video that gives them the words. I am Bikash Kalita, Leadership and Organizational Performance Consultant based in Guwahati, Assam, and I will see you next week.